I handed my sister a veil. It was soft ivory lace, carefully chosen to match her dream dress. I thought she would at least offer a small smile. A quick thanks. Instead, her hand cracked across my face. The sound echoed in the surprisingly quiet boutique, making every head snap towards us. My cheek burned instantly. A sharp, searing pain that quickly spread. I could feel the heat radiating from it. The air felt thick, heavy with unspoken shock. Leave. You don't belong here. Brittany's voice was low, but every word was a poison dart. Her eyes, usually sparkling with self-importance, were narrowed into slits of pure disdain. She looked at me as if I was dirt, something disgusting she had just found on the sole of her expensive shoe. Her words cut deeper than the sting on my skin. They cut right through to a place inside me that was already raw and bleeding. The sting wasn't just on my cheek. Oh no. It was so much more than that. It was on my dignity, what little I had left. It was on my heart, which felt like it was shrinking, shriveling up inside my chest. It was on every sacrifice I had made, every quiet moment of effort, every single penny I had poured into making her day perfect. All of it dismissed with a single brutal strike and those harsh, unforgiving words. In that moment, standing there in front of strangers, feeling the shocked glances and muffled whispers, I knew something inside me had fundamentally shifted. This was no longer just about helping family. This was about survival. My sister, Brittany Sterling, stood on a pedestal in a crystal gown, looking every bit the queen she believed she was. The dress, a confection of satin and hand-sewn crystals, shimmered under the boutique's carefully aimed spotlights, throwing tiny rainbows across the plush gray carpet. A collective gasp had rippled through the room when she first stepped out, and now a wave of applause followed. It wasn't just polite clapping. It was a genuine, raucous ovation. Our mother, her face a mask of pure adoration, clasped her hands to her chest. Cousins, aunts, and Brittany's gaggle of fawning friends cheered and whistled. Even the boutique staff, women who saw beautiful brides every day, seemed captivated. Brittany turned slowly, a practiced, radiant smile on her face, soaking in the admiration as if it were oxygen. And me? I sat in a velvet armchair tucked into a far corner, a forgotten piece of furniture. In my lap, I held her purse, a ridiculously expensive designer bag that felt heavier than it should. I was her keeper of things, her silent assistant. My role today, as it had been for most of my life, was to be present but unseen, available but unheard. I watched the scene unfold, a familiar ache settling deep in my bones. This was the story of us replayed in 1,000 different settings. Brittany, the sun, me, the shadow she cast. I remembered her 10th birthday party. She'd wanted a pony. Not to ride a pony at a party, but an actual pony of her own. My parents had laughed, told her it was impossible. But the next day, a beautiful Shetland pony with a pink ribbon tied around its neck was standing in our backyard. They had rented it for the whole summer. I had turned 12 a few months earlier. I had asked for a specific telescope, one I'd saved half the money for from my paper route. I'd spent weeks researching it, circling it in catalogs. On my birthday, my parents gave me a sweater. A nice sweater. Practical and warm. But not the telescope. We thought this was more sensible. Anna, my dad had said, ruffling my hair. You'll get more use out of it. Sensible. That was my word. Brittany's was spectacular. Throughout high school, the pattern became more entrenched. When Brittany made the cheerleading squad, my parents had a banner printed and hung it over the garage door. They threw a surprise party for her. When I won the state-level science fair for a project I'd spent 6 months perfecting, they offered a quiet, "That's great, honey," over dinner before my mom immediately turned to Brittany and asked about her plans for the homecoming dance. My victory was a footnote in the grand narrative of Brittany's social life. I learned to stop sharing my achievements. They felt small and insignificant when held up to the dazzling light of her popularity. It was easier to just be quiet, to nod along, to live in the background where the expectations were lower and the disappointments less sharp. Even now, as adults, nothing had changed. At Christmas dinner last year, Brittany announced her engagement to Michael. The whole family erupted. My father opened a bottle of champagne he'd been saving for a special occasion. My mother cried happy tears. For an hour, they talked about the ring, the proposal, the wonderful man Michael was. Later, when there was a lull in the conversation, I mentioned that my firm had offered me a junior partnership. It was a huge step in my career, something I had worked tirelessly for. My father nodded, a distracted look on his face. Good for you, Anna. That's really something. Then he turned to Michael. So, Michael, what are your thoughts on a spring wedding? My promotion, my moment of professional triumph, was just a conversational speed bump on the highway to Brittany's wedding. Sitting in that boutique, the memory was so vivid, it felt like it was happening all over again. I watched my mother fuss over a stray thread on Brittany's gown. Her touch gentle, reverent. She had never looked at me that way. Not once. My touch was for fixing things. A broken zipper, a stained tablecloth, a wobbly table leg. I was the reliable one, the capable one. Brittany was the one to be adored, to be cherished. I was a verb. She was a noun. A cousin, Jessica, caught my eye from across the room and gave me a small, pitying smile before quickly looking away. That was almost worse than being ignored. The pity it confirmed that everyone saw the dynamic. Everyone understood my role. They knew I was the family workhorse, the designated background character. They accepted it as the natural order of things. I adjusted the heavy purse in my lap and tried to force a smile. A mask I had perfected over 29 years. The applause for my sister finally died down and she stepped off the pedestal, her entourage swarming her. I remained in my corner, the silent keeper of the purse, the invisible sister, waiting for the next instruction, the next dismissal. For the past 8 months, my life had ceased to be my own. It had been entirely consumed by the colossal, ever-expanding black hole that was Brittany's wedding. She and Michael wanted a fairy tale, and she had presented my parents with a budget that made my father's face turn a pale, sickly gray. They had some savings, but not nearly enough to cover the kind of opulence Brittany demanded. I remember the night it all started. We were in my parents' kitchen. Brittany had just shown them the quote from the wedding planner. "We just can't, sweetie," my father had said, his voice strained. This is more than a down payment on a house." Brittany's face crumpled. The tears came instantly, big and theatrical. "But it's my dream. It's the only thing I've ever wanted. I thought you loved me." That's when my mother's eyes landed on me. It wasn't a pleading look or even a hopeful one. It was an expectant look. The same look she gave me when the trash needed to be taken out. "Anna has a good job," Mom said quietly. Not to me, but to my father. As if I weren't even there. "She's always been so good with money. So sensible." And there it was again. Sensible. My sensibility was not a virtue to be admired, but a resource to be exploited. I was being nominated to be the silent, unacknowledged financier of my sister's fantasy. I should have said no. I should have stood up, listed my own dreams. The condo I was saving for, the trip to Italy. But looking at my father's stressed face and hearing Brittany's heartbreaking sobs, the word no got stuck in my throat. The lifelong training kicked in. Be the good daughter. Be the fixer. So I agreed. The arrangement was made in hushed tones. I would transfer money into their account, and they would pay the vendors. Brittany would never know. It was my contribution. They called it my gift to the family. But it wasn't a gift. A gift is given freely. This felt like extortion cloaked in the language of familial duty. The sacrifices started immediately. First, I drained my personal savings account. Next went my vacation fund. Goodbye, Italy. Hello, caterer's deposit. I started working overtime, picking up every extra shift I could at the architecture firm. My colleagues joked about me trying to become CEO overnight. They didn't know I was working until 10 p.m. most nights, so my sister could have imported orchids instead of local roses. My social life disintegrated. I couldn't tell friends the truth. That I couldn't afford a $20 movie ticket because I had just paid a non-refundable $5,000 deposit for an ice sculpture. The cruelest irony was Brittany's complete lack of awareness, which often manifested as casual cruelty. One afternoon, while we were at a cake tasting, she wrinkled her nose at my 2-year-old winter coat. "God. Anna, don't you ever buy new clothes? You look so frumpy." I just smiled, the bitter taste of the too sweet frosting in my mouth, knowing that the cost of her 5-tier gold leaf dusted wedding cake could have bought me an entire new wardrobe. My parents were complicit in the deception. To Brittany and the rest of the world, they were the doting parents giving their perfect daughter the wedding of her dreams. I was just the sensible older sister, the frumpy one in the corner. The slap itself was a shock. A sudden, sharp explosion of violence. But it was the moments that followed that truly broke me. Through the haze, I saw Brittany's face. Not remorseful, but twisted into a mask of pure contempt. "Leave," she hissed again. "You are ruining this for me." The thought was so absurd. I was the one who had made all of this possible. The dress, the roof over this boutique, the lights shining down on her. And yet, in her mind, my mere presence was a stain on her perfect day. I looked past her, searching for an ally. My eyes found my mother's. She stood frozen, her mouth a thin, hard line. I saw a flicker of discomfort, but it was gone instantly, replaced by a cool, calculated neutrality. She smoothed down her silk blouse, taking a small step back. She didn't rush to my side. She didn't reprimand Brittany. She did nothing. In the silent court of our family, my pain was inadmissible evidence. The sales assistant, a polished woman named Sophie, suddenly became intensely interested in a rack of bridesmaid dresses. My aunts and cousins averted their gazes. They were all participating in a collective act of erasure. I felt a wave of nausea roll through me. I was an outcast, a pariah in my own family. With a strength I didn't know I possessed, I turned. I walked towards the large glass door. As my hand closed around the cold brass handle, I heard Brittany's laugh. A light, tinkling sound. It was a final, brutal twist of the knife. I stepped out into the chilly afternoon air. The noise of the city street hit me like a physical blow. I leaned against the cold brick of the building next door. Inside my head, a chaotic storm of thoughts raged. For years, I had swallowed the slights, telling myself it was the price of peace. But the slap had changed everything. It wasn't a slight. It was an assault. My trembling hands fumbled for my phone. I opened my banking app. There it was, Brittany's wedding fund. A card linked directly to my life savings. The card she was at this very moment trying to use to purchase a $20,000 dress. My thumb hovered over the freeze card button, then moved to the more permanent option, cancel card. A final confirmation screen popped up. Are you sure? A tidal wave of fear washed over me. My mother would scream. My father would lecture. Brittany would be incandescent with rage. But then I felt the phantom sting on my cheek again. I heard Brittany's laugh. They saw me as a utility, an ATM. And you don't owe loyalty to a machine that just dispenses cash. You turn it off. I pressed confirm. Card canceled. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a profound, bone-deep sense of calm. I walked to the corner and looked through the boutique's window. I saw Brittany at the counter. I saw Sophie shake her head. I saw Brittany's face contort, her mouth opening in a silent scream of disbelief, then fury. She, the golden child, had just been told no. And she had no idea that the no had come from me. The first call came less than 15 minutes later. It was Brittany. I let it ring. Finally, I answered, putting the phone on speaker. "What is wrong with you?" she shrieked. My card was declined. The salesgirl looked at me like I was trash. "What did you do?" "I canceled the card." "Brittany," I said, my voice steady. "You what? Why? Mom and Dad are paying for the wedding. You're just managing the account." "They lied to you." "Brittany," I said, "every single dollar, the venue, the caterer, that dress came from my savings account. All of it?" "You're lying," she whispered. "You're just jealous. You've always been jealous of me." "Think whatever you need to think," I said. "But the money is gone. The card is off. The well is dry." I hung up. The next call was from my mother. "Anna, what is going on?" she asked, her voice tight with forced calm. "You canceled the wedding fund card? You need to turn it back on right now. Think of the embarrassment." "My sister's wedding," I repeated bitterly. "The one I am paying for. The one where she slapped me across the face while you stood by and did nothing." "She's under stress. You're the big sister. You should be more understanding." "She slapped me," I said flatly. "And you chose her feelings over my dignity. But my money? I get to choose what happens to that." "You are being incredibly selfish," she snapped. "Selfish?" I laughed. A sharp, jagged sound. "You took my savings, my future. You stood by while she assaulted me." "No. Mom, I will not turn the card back on." My father called next. He tried the man-to-man approach. "Anna, we need to be adults here." It was a little slap. When a sterling gives their word, they keep it. "It was my money all along, Dad," I said. "And now I'm done." I turned my phone off. The collapse began in earnest. Emails from the venue, the caterer, the florist, all citing declined payments. The fairy tale was unraveling. And for the first time, I wasn't the one frantically stitching it back together. I was the one holding the scissors. On the third evening, I received a call from an unknown number. "Hello?" "Anna, it's Michael, Brittany's fiancé." My heart dropped. I had always liked Michael. "Michael, hi." "I'm really confused," he stammered. "Brittany is a mess. Your parents aren't making sense. All the vendors are calling me. Brittany said you're doing this to get back at her. Is that true?" I took a deep breath. "Michael, I need to tell you the truth. Her parents are not paying for the wedding. They haven't paid for a single thing. I am paying for it." All of it. Silence. Then, what? That's... The budget was over $100,000. Anna. Yes. It's my life savings. It was supposed to be a down payment for my own place. Why? He asked. Because that's my role in the family. I'm the fixer. But Michael... She slapped me. In the boutique. And my family watched and did nothing. So I decided I was done. She hit you. Yes. And it wasn't the first time she's been cruel. I need to go, he said abruptly. If this story touches you, please subscribe to the channel and share the video to help me grow and improve. Your support means the world to me. I didn't hear from anyone for the rest of the night. But the next afternoon, a text came through from my cousin Jessica. Michael moved out. He called off the engagement. The day of the wedding arrived under a steel gray sky. The official postponement announcement had gone out, citing unforeseen family circumstances. But the gossip mill was churning. I decided the truth needed a wider audience, so I drove to the venue. It was a surreal pilgrimage. The grand estate was imposing, but the illusion shattered as I got closer. No valets, no music, just a handful of bewildered guests in the parking lot. I walked into the main reception hall. It was a cavern of failure, vast, empty, with stacks of folded chairs. And there, in the center, was my family. Robert stood stiffly in his tuxedo. My mother looked pale. And Brittany? She was wearing a cheap rental dress, her makeup streaked with tears. She wasn't a radiant bride. She was a broken doll. You... She spat when she saw me. You actually dared to show your face here. You ruined my life. My mother rushed forward. Anna, please, it's not too late. We can fix this. Just call the caterers. I stepped back. There is nothing to fix, I said, my voice clear and calm, carrying to the small group of guests who had followed me in. For the past year, I have sacrificed my savings and my future to pay for this wedding because I was told it was my duty. And in return, I was treated like a servant. My sister slapped me, and my parents watched and did nothing. I looked at the guests. This empty hall is not my failure. This is what happens when you build a fairy tale on a foundation of lies. This is what happens when you try to build a wedding on your sister's back. Eventually, she stands up. The silence was heavy. My parents stood, turned to stone. Then, Michael appeared in the doorway. He wasn't in a tux, just a simple suit. He looked tired. He walked into the room and addressed the guests. I want to thank you all for coming, he said steadily. The wedding is off permanently. Brittany sobbed louder. I was told a story about the generosity of the Sterling family. Michael continued. I have learned that this story was a fabrication. This entire wedding was being funded by Anna, who sacrificed her future for a family that did not reciprocate that loyalty. I cannot marry into a family that builds its happiness on such deceit. The wedding is off because Brittany lied. My father turned a mottled red. How dare you? You shame my family. He turned to me. This is all your fault. My mother grabbed my arm, digging her nails in. Fix this, Anna. No, I said, pulling away. My Uncle John stepped forward, placing a hand on my father's shoulder. That's enough. Robert, I've watched you two do this to her for her entire life. She paid for everything, and you let her sister slap her. This isn't on Anna. This is on you. The dam broke. The guests began to leave, offering me sympathetic nods while avoiding my parents. My family stood isolated in the center of the empty room. Their reputation was gone. I turned my back on them and walked out into the rain. It felt cleansing. In the end, Brittany lost her fiancé and her fantasy. My parents lost their reputation, but I gained my peace. The following week, I took what was left of my savings and booked a trip to the coast. I sat on the beach, realizing I didn't need their approval to exist. My value was mine, and it had been all along. If you have ever been slapped, used, or silenced by the people who were supposed to love you, this story is for you. You are not invisible. Your pain